You're listening to the Field Report today. I'm going to discuss some things that we've been talking about based on faith and religion and expressing your faith and freedom to worship. And one of the posts earlier about the Separatists was that people were allowed to freely worship. You have the freedom to worship. But here in America, the laws have changed over the last, 50, 60 years where prayer was removed from school. But look, you're allowed to... Whoa, no, wait a second. School forces students to pray Islamic prayers and make Muslim prayer rugs. Wow, we've been had. I don't know what happened to the church 50 years ago. Maybe we felt like we owed everybody something. This is how a lot of people believe too. Now they're going to force Islamic prayer. See, I posted up about this the Separatist movement because, see, the whole point to the Separatist movement is because they were persecuted to freely worship. And when they came to America in 1647, they had the opportunity to share and witness their faith freely without discrimination, without persecution. But look, because you notice they were spitting on the Ten Commandments, removing it out of Oklahoma. School forces students to pray Islamic prayers and make Muslim prayer rugs. I'll be honest with you. There are school districts around our area right now that would be highly offended that you even talk about Islam this way. In fact, there's Christian churches that would be highly offended because they are trying to be inclusive and they're trying to respect all religions while they're stepping on the Christian Bible. They're not Christian pastors. If they're that concerned about worrying about how they might offend somebody, there's no possible way they can get around this. Okay, they're just purely afraid of standing up for the Bible. That's the point to this. Because while they do this under the radar, this is what's been happening in America. And look at Dearborn, Michigan. Do you really think if you go into Dearborn, Michigan, that the way they run things up there, do you think that they're going to allow you to bring your Christian Bible in there according to what the way the imams do it around those Islamic Muslim prayer sites? They need to tear down the Muslim prayer sites, especially because the whole point to the Islamic religion is once they toppled down the buildings at 9/11, they erected their own mosques. That's part of their religion. It's a form of conquering. So they're conquering our schools this way, and you see these kids that are kneeling down before Allah, their prayer God, their God or whatever. Okay. See, the thing is that nobody has a problem offending the Bible, offending Jesus, peeing on Jesus. Look at what the Occupy Street movement did. Okay, they have no problem peeing on Jesus. They have no problem with that. I wonder what happens to those people in the end. I really do. They make cracks. They talk about Jesus. Really, can you imagine? I remember never thinking about things like this. They're removing 10 Commandments in the middle of the night, these shady deals, these underhanded, dark little backroom deals, removing all the things that make America great, right? The historical monuments, what they're doing in Louisiana. So there you are. Listen, the school forces students. What taxpayers, where is this legal? That schools can do this. It's not legal. It says here, school forces students to pray Islamic prayers and make Muslim prayer rugs. That's outrageous. I remember thinking in the backdrop, because I grew up, when I was one of those people, I didn't like to be offended. I'm not one of those people that likes to hear people force religion, because that's why I really believe what the Separatists did, is that they could worship freely without offending other people, because that's called freedom of worship. It's not about offending anybody. But when you see stuff like this also happened at school. See, I want you guys to see, this is from the Washington Times. This is actually from August 2016, which I'm a little behind, but I saw this on Facebook and I found the article, and we're going to zoom in. Now, okay, anybody ever grew up in a poor neighborhood or had to get free milk from the free lunch program, because your family's on welfare benefits? Could you imagine how, it's embarrassing because you don't want to have anybody look at you strange or weird, even if you didn't do anything. Kids are cruel and difficult sometimes, but this really takes the cake because I don't know any teacher. How in the world would you feel comfortable doing this to a little kid, putting a stamp on their little arm, and you put a smiley face to make it all better? Oh my gosh, man, I don't, no wonder the dad was upset. They did this to they're stamping their little kids with this. That sucks. I actually have to call it a day. This is how upset I am. If I was the mom and I saw this, I would be like, why are you stamping my kids with anything? That's not your right to do that. These are little kids. Do you realize how impressionable kids are? Even as adults, we're pretty impressionable. I get upset because people say a lot of things that shouldn't say anything. But then they're stamping a little arm, this little kid. You know how cute kids are. They bounce around, they laugh, they try to understand what's going on, okay? Especially at 5, 6, 7 years old, 8 years old. They really don't understand, okay? All they know is they feel bad because they don't want to be embarrassed. Well, that's one way to embarrass a kid. Just go ahead and stamp it right there for everybody to see. I wonder what these teachers are thinking. I really do. I don't know. And people say you should send your kids to a public school. Really? I would not want to send my kids to a public school knowing my little ones because they're impressionable. They're little kids. My goodness. I would be so upset. I have to have a short day today. This really upsets me. I know this is over. This is like last year, I guess, sometime in August. Oh, this really bothers me. The way they treat kids. Oh my gosh. If I was a parent, I would face plant some of these teachers for doing things like this. I really would. But that's why I'm not going to go to a public school because I would probably face plant the teacher who did this. I would love to know why she would go out of her way, why she thinks or he think it's okay to go ahead and stamp your kids. I mean, you can put a safety pin on their bookcase, on their book bag. You could actually put a pin a note where it's discreet. No, put a big black stamp on there so everybody else can see. Thank you, Miss Teacher, Mr. and Mrs. Educational of America. This is your education. No, this is embarrassing. This is what kids go through. They sit there and they get embarrassed. They get humiliated. And then they have to go along to get along and they don't feel comfortable. Of course you wouldn't feel comfortable. Oh my goodness. No wonder you didn't feel comfortable. These kids they don't ever have to explain us. If I was going to school right now and I was wondering why these kids are upset all the time, I could see why. I wouldn't want to be put on the spot like that either. I'm really angry. And I'm not even a parent. The things that people do to kids. I hope more adults start standing up for the Bible too, because I'm going to tell you, I mean, they've told us all these years that it was offensive to share the Christian Bible. They're taking out 10 commandments, spitting on Jesus. There's no pictures of Jesus. I would like to see how many of those churches that rent out their sanctuaries really have pictures of Jesus, even if they even have a sanctuary at all. Because they spend about 20 minutes of worship music and then a motivational speak. That's not church, guys. That's why we don't go to church. And that's why I went into talking about why authentic faith. There is a huge difference. Anyone nowadays can they can put a cross up and call themselves a church now because they get a tax exemption. And I just don't know what to say. You could label yourself a church. You could label yourself anything. I don't know. I don't know what to think. I'm going to call this post cheap grace. That's what it is. We have cheap grace. I see a lot of people that hand out tracts and Bibles. I always try to keep them nearby because I might need that as an emergency. That is your emergency plan. And I just went on to say this earlier in a post on my Facebook page that that's why people always have the opportunity to share their faith as they choose to. You know what I mean? You have your opportunity to share it, and you do it discreetly with respect, because you're not trying to go and offend anybody. But I don't know if you're going to be able to get around that, because if you go up there to Portland, Oregon, see, they intimidated this crowd of, I don't know, the city of Portland was having a parade, and there was a bunch of people in a crowd that were preparing for the parade, but they intimidated them so much that they ended up shutting down the parade. So I guess it's either going to be these people are going to intimidate people, and people are going to back down, and they're not going to be able to have the ability to stand up. And I think they think it's about laws because they're afraid to break the laws or something. I think that's why people back down, because they're afraid they will get in trouble by the police if they say something. And most of these people aren't the kind of people that speak out. Okay, they're just afraid. They don't want to get in trouble. That's really what this is. They don't want to get in trouble by the police for speaking out. That's all it is. So Antifa wins. So there you are. And what ends up happening is they use these intimidation tactics on innocent and mostly weak people, naive, because you could see by that stamp, that little girl's a little girl. And I bet you that teacher probably doesn't think anything of it. I bet you she doesn't think anything of putting that stamp on that little girl's arm with a smiley face, of all things. You know what? If I'm thinking like a teacher and I want parents to have a note, I would easily pin that note discreetly in their book bag and say, make sure you just let your parents know that, so that, they know that you need to remind them to bring money. And if you don't have any money, let me know, because I'll pay for your lunch. That's what I would do if I was a teacher in Alabama. That's what I would do. There's a difference. I worked as a teacher's aide in Georgia. The poverty is incredible. My brother was a substitute teacher. I was his teacher's aide. I took some classes in college, but nothing quite like being a teacher's aide. I was burned out, by the way. And my poor brother, he's still a teacher, and he's trying to become a principal. And, I was burned out. I don't mind being my brother's assistant, but it is an exhausting job. So the reason I wanted to do that history lesson earlier about the Separatists, because I find this very interesting, because, as Islam wants to continue to push their religion, and we don't educate ourselves on the Quran, we don't simply understand that the whole point of intimidating and putting people in these awkward positions, because most of Americans are pretty naive, and they're not the kind of people that go out of the way to offend anybody. That's the average American. The other people, they're turned off by everything. There's that, and then there's the ones that are turned off by everything. You can't say 2 words to them. You won't win an argument because they don't care, okay? There's a difference. There are people that care, and they care too much, and they go out of the way not to offend people. Those are the ones they back down, and they're afraid to stand up for anything because they don't really understand that they're not in trouble with the law when they say no to something. Actually, that's the whole point, is that they got to learn how to say no and stop saying yes to everything. The reason we're in the trouble we're in is because we got our priorities mixed up, and somebody needs to help clarify. You can't say no to these things. You shouldn't have to be forced to do these things. This little girl she has a little bitty arm, and the teacher should know better. They have those damn safety pins. Okay, I need to change the subject here because I'm going to get very far here, and I'm going to have to call it a day because I am a little mad right now, even if this was like over 9 months ago. I'm just stunned. So if I sound a little like I'm sounding off, it's because we do go out of our way to respect other people and what they believe and what they don't believe. Actually, we go out of our way to help a lot of people, and we take a lot of grief. Honestly, we do. We put up with a lot of grief. I see my parents who, they're trying to feed 7 kids' mouths, 6, 7 kids' mouths, and they didn't have the advantages. But I see a lot of people that discredited my parents, and I'm like, my parents were actually really nice people. They wouldn't do the things that they do today. In fact, my dad would cry over my sisters, and he eventually ended up having to give up his parental rights because he got too old to care for them. And I see what it does to a family. I see how people go around and get around this, and they go out of the way to hurt families, and they cause division. And actually, ironically, I was in the middle of a big fight with my younger brother, Dan, and it woke me up. Because, see, I'm not going out of my way to be religious. I realize we're in a spiritual battle. And if we don't have the ability to call out to Jesus and pray for our family. See, my mom's Jewish, okay? She's not one of those people. She's more secular, okay? So she won't talk about anything. She'll talk about God, but she's not very religious. We weren't very religious at all. But I see a turning point here. And I see that you have to kind of know when you can say something, when you can't. And when you're in the heat of the battle, when you're in the middle of a big family fight, I do call out to Jesus. And I will keep calling out to Jesus. Some people are offended by that, but I'm sorry to say this, but that's the reason we're in the trouble, because we've always kind of creep around the topic. We dance around the subject. No, you got to get right to the point. See, the time is now for America to stand up for the things that are those small things. See, those small things are now big things, because if you were to go and look what happened in Oregon, they were having a parade, and Antifa made sure that they intimidated them to the point that they canceled the parade. That shouldn't happen in America, but it's happening. And what I saw last year and over the last couple of years is the Patriot Riders, what they would do is they would gather around and they would support communities. And what we need to see is that we need to stand up for the little guys, these little kids that don't have anybody to stand up for them. Okay? That's what I'm calling out to all of you guys, that this cheap grace, it's not only going to work for so long. You have to really stand up for it at some point. And listen, if people are so afraid to stand up for the Bible and they're afraid to do it, it's because they don't understand their Bible. They haven't read it enough. They really don't understand. Because if you were to look in some of your communities, you have to ask those church pastors that are renting out to imams on Friday night prayer. See, what's happening to our churches is because apparently they're losing money because people aren't going to church. And I can guarantee, if you have a strong message and you say we're going to take a stand for the Christian faith, and we're not going to back in, and we're not going to cave into the Islamic imams, because they can throw a lot of money at these people right now to rent out their sanctuaries. See, it's happening in our region, and we've been outspoken for about 3 years about it. I've mentioned it several different times about what's going on with foster children. I've mentioned it several times about what's going on in some of the Christian churches and what's going on with these outreach programs, and they're willing to help. But if you have to change the way you do things, no wonder. See, there are churches that do rely on that 501c3 status because they are trying to do something. They are trying to help, and some of them don't have the access to the help that they can. You know what I mean? I mean, there are people giving to help the community. So it's like a kind of a complex topic. No, I don't want to see the church sell out to Islam is what I'm saying, okay? And there's not enough people to financially support these churches and these organizations. You can even see them on YouTube. Some of these ministries, they're barely making it. They're trying to reach out to people, and they're trying to help. And I will be honest with you. You know how many people made fun of evangelist Anita Fuentes? Do you know how she sent me a package? She took the time to write carefully the scriptures she wanted me to read. She even put little memo tape. Now, for a woman who's as busy as she is, and all the remarks that people made about her, she took the time to send it in a neat package. She sent a bookmarker. It was a really sweet package. And I will tell you, one of the other experiences I had with Pastor Paul Bagley is that my nephew and my stepdad were both paralyzed all within a matter of 3 weeks of each other. And I cried and I prayed and I asked them to send me prayer shawls for my nephew and my stepdad. Do you know those prayer the prayer blankets? They sent them. They brought them. And I I mean, I'm going to tell you, we do not give credit to all these good ministries that are doing a lot of things, and especially at a time of need. So is it too much for some of us to start speaking out and asking our Patriot Riders to start showing up at these church conferences and looking out for these church pastors? Is it much to ask any of you guys? Because I'm telling you, I know you would. I think we need to start this. I want to see more people spend their summers circling around and supporting one another. Because you know what? After seeing this, I mean, I have to call it a day, obviously, okay? I hope we get the message across because I think it's really that important. I hope you guys take the time to consider that this summer because there's a lot opportunity for people to reach out for one another and instead of making cracks at each other. And looking at what happened in Oregon, that's just one of those examples again and again. Just weak people are caught up in a weak moment and they intimidate them into these things. And after seeing that picture, I guess you can understand why I'm upset. I don't want to go on and on about stuff like this, but it just really bothered me that this is how we get taken advantage of because we are nice people. Americans are very nice people. They're generous. They're kind. Some of our neighbors, they'll go out of the way to help each other. Listen, some of them have been dragged through a lot of their own stuff. If we give each other the benefit of the doubt, I promise you, you're going to get a lot more out of other people. And you give them the benefit of the doubt. And I think the same thing of our president. I know people will not give him the benefit of the doubt. But I mean, I'm telling you, I don't know. I don't agree with a lot of the things that are happening. I get it. In fact, it bothers me a lot. But I'm still willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. But listen, they're running over people like a Mack truck. And I know some of you that have, belong to the Patriot Riders, this is a perfect opportunity to start, showing up for events. And, look, I think this summer will be Antifa. They're looking for a fight all the time. They even prepared blades. This is how they're intimidating people. So be ready. Be ready to stick your neck out for one another and support one another because that's what the summer is about. Okay, you just be on notice. That's what we're confronting all the time. They're gonna make people feel bad, and and that's where we're at. I don't even know what else to say. I mean, if we don't say something, then we back in a corner, and then we're afraid to stand up. And then if we get into a pattern of not saying something, then the next time it happens, we won't be prepared to what to say, how to say it. To me, at this point, I don't know. If I say any more, I'm just going to get myself worked up, and I really need to call it a day. I am pretty annoyed at the way things are what has happened. I'd like to know why a teacher would not send a note home instead of putting a big fat stamp so everybody can see it. I mean, I guess you have a point to make, right? There's so many people on social media have an axe to grind. They're so quick to unfriend people. They're so quick to judge people. I see it on YouTube. I ain't give anybody the benefit of the doubt for nothing. My goodness. I mean, I would not. Listen, if you grew up in a home where no one gives each other the benefit of the doubt, oh my gosh, how do you tolerate that? I'm always willing to give other people the benefit of the doubt because I realize that, if you're not merciful and graceful, then you'll end up with cheap grace.